Leviticus 23 and
Shabbat Shalom.
Numbers 10. Shabbat Shalom. It says that we're supposed to blow the shofars at the new moons, the holy days, the Shabbats, and warfare. Remember, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. It's also mentioned in Joel 2, blow the trumpet in Zion. And it says in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians 15 that there's going to be the shofar, it's going to be blown, and there's going to be a shout, and they're going to catch the bride up to meet the bridegroom, Yeshua. And in Revelation, there's the 7 trumpet blasts. So, the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol hashofar. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who sanctified us by his commandments and commanded us to heed, hear, listen, and obey the voice, the sound of the shofar, the ram's horn. Amen. Behold, the bridegroom cometh. Pastor?
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's good to have everybody here today. We're going to have 2 speakers. I think I'm going to start off with Michael Griffin. And, I'm still cleaning up from those people who vandalized the back. And several years ago, Congregation Shalom was meeting at the Nathaniel Center, and G.G. Crow made this book called Alphabet Creations. And not creations.
Called what again?
Alphabet. It's about the Hebrew alphabet began with basically Egyptian hieroglyphs they took and they repurposed. Because the Egyptian alphabet, that's what you want to call it, hieroglyphs were made to be difficult because they wanted to create a scribal class that could control the country through reading, and they wanted to make it very difficult.
Like the Catholics.
So what happened was Semitic, probably Canaanite slaves in the turquoise mines in Sinai decided we don't need to know
Rabbis did too.
200 hieroglyphs just to understand some of it. They had thousands of hieroglyphs. So someone had this idea, it's like, let's just, all we need is 20. Let's give these, like in the Egyptian language, well, you can still see, it's interesting. That's the letter M. It looks like that because kids still draw water like that to this day, right? Mm-hmm. But in Egyptian, that's the letter N, but in the Semitic language, you have Mayim, so we still have letter M from the hieroglyphs carried over to this day, right? So anyway, remember my dad's books. We have a handbook for Christian soldiers. We have a handbook for Christian soul winners, just fresh off the press. And I'm working on it's called the Handbook for Messianic Believers.
A trilogy.
It's a trilogy of handbooks. I'm putting it together. I got the binder, and I need maybe you could help me with this, Michael. I need to have a page showing the pictograph or the hieroglyph and what it means, because my dad had this idea that each letter has some symbolic meaning.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So I've accumulated some of his teachings together to put in this book. So we're going to have Michael come up.
Michael Griffin?
Yes, Michael Griffin's going to come up and teach for 30 minutes, and then we're going to have Robert come and share it as well.
We've been trying to get Michael up here for a long time.
I've been pressuring him. I said, you need to get this.
Finally worked. He's nagged him to death, eh?
I have my little, so we should be okay. I figured, hey church family, how are you guys doing first off, right? Shabbat Shalom.
Good morning.
Shalom. I want to have something that was a little bit more fun and open, more conversational. I tried not to put too much data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
these
are all just these are all just ideas. All of our experiences as humans can add to these, right? So any experience that we've had with any of these. Now I chose to start with 2 letters and 1 word because I thought, why not? It'd be a nice little kind of bite, and it's a lot of data in just a letter. Just as you heard Dr. Mystic speaking about, there's a lot that has happened through time, but we're fortunate enough to have a lot of that data now and access to that information. So, I wanted to start with what we know now is the first letter of, I'll just try to keep this simple. I'll say of the Hebrew alphabet, what we call the Hebrew alphabet. And at the top of this page, I have what's referred to as modern Hebrew. Some people call it Aramaic square script and other names that aren't as nice, but we'll do that. You can see that the aleph lazily drawn is pretty much the same as the square script now. Right, I'm just want to draw these up here at the top of your paper. But over time, essentially all we're showing is that letters morph. People like to do what's easy. And just like how cursive letters look different than when you print, it slowly changes the language. The letter aleph, if I could draw better, would easily look like an ox head.
It's on the paper.
Right? That's why I have the printout. So we have an ox or a bullhead, and that same type of cattle you have all around the world, right? They're used by humans. And these were extremely important to the culture. And there are still the Bedouins today and people that live in a nomadic lifestyle where it's still extremely important to them.
That was good eating.
Yeah. And we still, right? We still eat on them today.
Not just that, they're workers, right?
Exactly.
They didn't have, this is pre-industrial. They needed to have that ox to,
Exactly.
to work the fields and things.
He's getting to the more important part. Is not the food part of them, but everything else, the food production. So whenever we have wheat, for example, we need to thresh that wheat.
Always thinking barbecue.
And what's being used to thresh that wheat? Well, they would use the cow, the ox. Now, I didn't want to go too into it, so I didn't have, but there's a whole root tree where you can see that the oxen will be tied to the same word as thresh in Hebrew. Everything with their purpose, their function, tied together in root trees.
The calling of Elisha comes to mind.
It does. Everything will tie together.
Yes.
Elisha.
Yeah. Those are, it's so
Yeah.
funny how it's a little bit,
Must have been wealthy with all the ox he had, too.
well, I mean, definitely a
Well,
representation of power. Abraham,
12
I mean,
oxen, and he burned up the yoke.
And had a barbecue.
Well, I'm
Well, he's
sure.
leaving that life behind, right? By destroying his livestock, he's like, he's not going to have the temptation to go back to being a farmer again. He's totally devoted.
He burned his boats.
Amen.
Burn the ship. That's what
Burned
he's
his
doing.
boat. Yeah, you can't burn that bridge. You can't go back. And, a lot of people tie together in Hebrew numerology. I'm not going to go into too much of that, but we'll go into the undeniable, indisputable. Is that our number one that we see in English, and
Numeral
again,
one.
there's a whole graph I'll give you guys at some point that shows the mutation throughout history, comes from the Aleph. Even Aleph is a more original name, but comes from the Aleph. So we have the letter A in modern.
Michael, are you dyslexic?
Did I draw that backwards?
Yeah.
Who writes their ones like
I
that?
was wondering about that. I thought maybe it was
No
me.
one draws their ones like that anymore. It's because I just drew this one, right? So we have this, modern, we have a bull's head, we have all this stuff, right? They seem so disconnected. They seem so different from one another. When you write it, it looks confusing.
Amen.
And that's and I won't go too much into that there, but that's a bull, and that people use that for everything in their home. I mean, you're talking about food, carrying your food, not just being food later in life, providing milk, but all sorts of just uses. Any farmer, even modern day, will tell you. I mean, they're workhorses. So that's Aleph. Just a little brief thing over Aleph. Now, this will all end up tying together, right? I don't want to just shoot over it too much, but we'll tie it all together in the end. And we have the Bet, which is the second letter, alphabet, Aleph, Bet, right? So we have the first and the second
page,
letter.
Second page, right?
Second page, page 2, right? The Bet, big page. So we have the modern Aramaic square script. And that really, like Hebrew, again, is pretty much just someone kind of slamming it out. And already when I draw that, you can see where now we're getting number 2 starts to come in. Before that, it gets a little bit kind of off looking from the bait, from the 2. It kind of flipped. This happens a lot with languages. When you were carving in stone, because most people are right-handed, the script would be right to left. But it's not uncommon to find older scripts in stones that are left to right in ancient Canaanite. So you still have, even then, depending on how it was convenient for you, maybe that was a lefty that did it right, but most people, and that's why we don't write in ink right to left, because it would smear all over your hand. Anyone who's left-handed will tell you now they have that struggle, right, smearing their ink. So it's to preserve the text. Direction is just whatever's
You
convenient.
said Canaan was where they did it?
Canaanite? Yes, they found some, and they'll do those like vertically, and those will be real weird. Sometimes it's all over the place, and you have to put it together. I mean, would you agree with that, Dr. Mystic? You've seen a lot of.
Yeah. Well, yeah, even in Greek, sometimes they just write whatever direction. Forwards, back. There's examples of them. The first line to go one way, the next line to go the other way.
Yeah, and they did that a lot in Hebrew too, and you can find that in certain other things, and they say there are
But-
religious purposes
Right.
too.
But Hebrews reads backwards for us, right?
Yeah.
What we think of, and Arabic and Aramaic,
yeah.
and the
Right.
European languages tend to write the other direction.
I feel like I was
It also tends to be east or west of the Middle East.
It always looks
whether
like more
it's
like a
forward
pay
or
whenever I
backward.
do that.
Or so left to right or right to left.
Right.
And a lot of those Semitic people, they want to be dyslexic because the rest of society is doing left to right, and they're doing right to left. So that's why it's flipped, because they're doing it from the Middle Eastern background in their brain.
It's just, it's interesting that though we feel that English is so disconnected, especially by thousands of years, you'll find once we start connecting, you'll see that it should be fairly easy for us to read certain scripts of Hebrew because we know the modern alphabet. And so the bait, it took a long time to get around to that. I'd like to zoom to the last one because it's the easiest for me to at least visualize. The floor plan of the tent, the house, bait, right? And even when you say you have different words, you have beit, bayit, you have all these different, but the same concept that is home, the house.
Like Bethlehem, house of.
Right.
Yeah, house of bread or house of sustenance, because lachem in Aramaic is meat for the most part. And there are even times in the Bible where they're clearly speaking about meat, but they use the word lechem, so sustenance for me.
Yeah, sometimes it means just food.
Yeah, that's why I think of it as sustenance. Whatever that culture has that they eat on, if you look into their language, you'll see that in that region, lechem will apply to whatever they eat.
I think in Syriac Aramaic, lechem also means bread for the most part, but was it bashar? They had the word for meat. So you read it and it says meat, but then you realize no, it doesn't mean meat in that context. It just means food.
But
it's wild, right?
But also,
Context
the word
determines the
lechem,
meaning.
the letters also could spell for warfare, because they would have to have sustenance for warfare. Milchama is from the same root.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. See, it all ties together. It's all roots and ties with uses, functionality, and purpose.
Connect the dots, yeah.
And with the bait, now we have a house, right? And it may not look like a house to us. Right? It's a pretty simple house. And what's funny is sometimes that door would be closed, and we'll see with later them trying to preserve the closing of the lips and the closing of the door to pronounce that hard bet instead of a soft. Right? And so these, again, these all still feel disconnected from modern. How could I ever draw this and you be able to read it? Now let's move on past the house. I know that I'm kind of zooming, but let's move to page 3, please. And again, there's a lot of data on there to read. Just about, I try to grab simple data of how the letter shifted through time that you can go over later. But I'm excited to get to the fun part, was where we start like making our own ideas of words, right? And so, to me, a super important word in the Bible to understand is Father. I think a lot of people base a lot of theology off of it. Some of us may not have that best of a relationship with our Father, so to some people that's actually more of a hindrance than you would realize.
He's the father of the fathers.
But exactly. Let's morph some of those ideas and make it into something that we can all hopefully relate to with some good figure in our life, and see how God is the ultimate of that figure. So if we look at the Middle Hebrew script that is presented on this page, If I go down, are you guys going to be able to see? Should I move like over here? Should I move somewhere? Should I clear this?
Just right over that for Marcus, Dark, if you need to.
Yeah, we'll go here. I'll kind of dodge that a little bit, just out of respect for people. So if we, I want to look at the word that we used for father in Hebrew. That's more of an abstract idea. The word father, you kind of have to have had that experience to understand what that means. In my mind, I really like concrete definitions, maybe because I'm a very object-oriented programmer and a network engineer, so I like to see things very concrete, mechanical perspectives. I'm going to use the Middle Hebrew script for a reason. Now, when we're doing this, this is the Aleph, the bull, and this is a very bad version of a bait. Okay. So the bull, strength, power, right? Provision, a workhorse, carries the load, physical, right? The strength of the house, bull of the house, the one who has to help support the household with physicality, strength, providing sustenance, going to the field working, right? Things of that nature. That is the father, the Av, right? He's the bull of the house. He's the one who provides that sustenance. So we literally, in the older script, right? It's literally the bull of the house. Now, does this just mean father, a male figure that can provide for you? Most of the time in the Bible, especially and in life, yes, right? But not always. It's something that can be applied.
It's also used for the word for to be a leader or something.
Exactly. It's that representation that this certain responsibility is falling on you, on your shoulders. You're the one that's holding that yoke. And if you're not really a father. Now going into that, we say, okay, father, strength of the household. They live in a tent. What's holding that tent up? Literally. A tent pole. Right? A tent pole. Now, there are multiple Hebrew words used for pole. It's actually, this is easier to see in its other uses with spear and things. But think that, so we have that it means father, or strength of the household, more concretely. So if we think of it as the strength of the house, right? Now it can mean the one who provides sustenance and support for all your needs, the strength of the house. And now we also have a tie to the tent pole. I know you guys probably can't read this, sorry. We also have a tie to the tent pole. What's interesting is now we have spring coming up, the time of Aviv.
Renewal.
Aviv is coming up, right? You say, well, how? What's interesting is we see the same word, Aleph Beit, with one more bait in it. Wow, how is father now related to the seed of the next harvest? Well, when you say it that way, how is the seed of the next generation passed? The father, right? And not only that, but it's related to a tent pole. And what's a tent pole with little houses all on it, if you think of it visually? You have a stalk with the homes of the seeds. This is the time of the Aviv. And it also ties to the word father.
Wow, that makes sense.
Ties to what word?
Aviv. So that's when the plants go into
Seeds,
harvest. They have the
springtime.
seeds. The next generation is coming forth. The father brings
That's
that
the name
forth. The father
before
of the
they
plant.
called it Nissan. Before they called it Nissan, it was called Aviv.
And I could go a lot on tiny words. I will do one more because it's fun. We've already went over a tent pole. Seeing that tent pole, right? And you think of that's a firm, hard structure, and they're if I recall, they're actually not leveled off on top. They tend to have a slope on them to support the tent. Now what we do is another word that's tied, that's really fun, is we have the strength of the house, right?
Right?
Now if we do Now, this little guy right here. Well, what does that look like to a lot of people? I'm sorry if you can't see it. You draw it up here. It is like this. What does that look like to anyone? Just off the bat, any ideas or no wrong answers? When I say it, maybe I won't, because then you may feel this.
A chair.
Chair. That's actually I probably did draw it like a chair. That's on me.
Like a recliner.
This is a hand.
Oh, yeah.
A hand
An
on
arm and a hand, right?
Arm and hand.
An open hand.
Right.
Today we would call that the. What was that, Brother Loeb? What's the hand?
Yud.
That's right. Now it's just
Hebrew
here. It's
Y-
just the
Hebrew
Yud.
Y.
Hebrew Y. Yud. Yud, which also means Yud, hand.
Hand.
Right?
Hand or power.
Exactly, because just like the hand of God represents the power of God moving for us, this word, again, I've drawn there, it does look like a chair, man, is oyev. This is for so when the strength of the house is in hand, seems odd.
It's better than his one.
It's a spear or an enemy. What do you do when the enemy is approaching? The strength of the house is in hand, the spear is in hand. All of these tied together, there's all these beautiful root trees, so that if you start to learn
Oh, and
just the letters, you can start to.
and Michael,
You can please.
if you put the Yud at the end after the Aleph and Bet, you have Abi, my father.
My father.
My
so the
father.
father that's in my hand. That's the one that's in my hand.
Yes.
Father
So
in my hand.
so he's going to
The
give you
strength
power.
of the
He's going to give you
household mind.
strength. Yes.
It's beautiful, right? And so
Very good.
when we look at how all these tie together and we think, wow, these grand pictograph, there's no way that I could look and ever read this. I mean, how can you say that's the same?
Right.
Because I feel that's the same when I look at it. Most of these older scripts, you start to not have a problem at all. And I think it's because of kind of what's at the bottom of my page. The symbols that we learned growing up, our alphabet, are ingrained into us. And if you look at this Middle Hebrew script,
Adapted from
This.
Wow, that makes sense now.
to here, now it's easier to see on the paper because I cheated.
Yeah.
If you looked ahead, you're cheating. Okay? Now, don't look ahead. And if I were to say that, how would you pronounce this word? I don't think any of us would, without any training, just look at that and understand how to pronounce it. Even someone that reads modern Hebrew, because they're not familiar with the script. Okay? But it's so funny how language just works its way around, and some people will take this all theological and say, well, he's twisted the language backwards and forward and up and down,
Right.
And I don't know, maybe they have some merit to it. I don't know. I think they read into it a little too much. But if we reverse this, so that's going the same direction that we read, we still get something odd. We get this, which is closer. I keep drawing a pay. I'm sorry, forgive me. It's just so. It's still very confusing, and it's drawn over a plant, so it's even more confusing. But if we just rotate it a little bit, I say, everyone, please pronounce this word for me. So this is Middle Hebrew. Do we all see it?
Yes.
We see the change. So it just takes and flips. You can just, all right, this is the symbol that you just take and you reduce it. All right, this was a little more jagged. It was a little more odd, right?
Yeah.
So right there it looks like a 6. Very bad. But here, now if you hit it hard, just like you said, someone said Abba. Someone said Abba, and I heard them. And what's interesting, in Hebrew, most words with the ah suffix are feminine. I mean, in most other languages as well. But Abba has that, what feels feminine. People make it, again, very theological in Hebrew, but the way they write it is if it's pronounced Abba. I'll put the H there, but that's a whole other language thing. They used to not pronounce those. So, Abba.
Right.
Because when you say the B, you can't help but have the after it. Ab. Ab. If you say it's soft, of, it sounds phonetically like a V. Of. They'll write that in English, transliterate. Sometimes you'll see that as a BH. Right? V. Hebrew, they'll say that is a V, which is different from the Vav, but that's a whole other conversation. So these are 2 letters, 1 word, but a lot of ideas and concepts that can be opened up from the Bible. Anytime you just see this 1 letter involved now, this 1 letter, the house, the first word in the Bible, Bereshit. What does the whole Bible begin with? The home. The home. And what does God build? What's He telling us that He's building for us? What does He create? A home.
Creates that home for us.
That Jesus said, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's an explosion of ideas and pictographs. The cow, I'm unfortunately not a farmer. Always kind of wish I was. A rancher, had that. I don't have that experience. That's why I really need to crowdsource. What are all the uses for this one animal? I mean, really in the understanding. How does it relate to you and your family? How does it relate to you in your life? And more importantly now, your relationship with your children and your relationship with God. So when it says, who is your father? In the Bible, when it's asking you, who is your father? You can choose God or you can choose anything other. So the strength of your household is God, or it's anything else. It can be anything that's not God is. All right?
The ox can also provide transportation.
Exactly. Hauling the wagons. I mean, everything that you can, every part of the food process, from the plowing to the planting to the harvesting to the threshing to the milling, is the ox. We still do that today. Now he has eyes and a smiley face. We still do that today. Yeah, let's make him a little. We still do that today, but we're very disconnected. All of our meat's just bought from stores. We don't. Most of us, I mean me included, for a long time, you think of just cow as kind of like a dumb animal. It's just you don't think of its use and its purpose, and all that it can provide. And I think, to be honest, I think that kind of wraps up for my little presentation. I'm not sure how long it went for.
You did 30 minutes, exactly.
Okay,
Very good.
perfect.
Good job.
Excellent. Thank you. Very nice.
We'll have to continue. On a mention.
Thank you.
Maybe we can go through the whole alphabet eventually.
Yeah, eventually, just slowly.
And like I said, with the letter A, it looks like that. But if you turn it upside down, you can see you got its little face here and its 2 horns, right?
Yeah.
So some of these.
Here's a nugget for you for the next 2 Hebrew letters, Gimel and Dalet.
Yeah.
You flip them, you have dog. Dalet Gimel is a fish.
Yeah.
Dog.
I think this would be a good series. Like I said, I have the book in the bag. Maybe it's Divine Providence. I found it.
Or Gimel
I
Dalet.
thought it was
that's
lost
the
because those people went in there and the racist anti-Semites that came and vandalized the church and ransacked the building for that.
Wow.
So,
Silver lining to the cloud.
well, yeah, I found it yesterday because I was like, I need to go and can't ignore it forever. Go in there and start. There's some things like some books I've misplaced that I found. It's like I need this. Like this, The Ascents of James. I have a program on YouTube channel where I talk about